Think pirates lived without rules? Think again. These seafaring crews had more regulations than your local DMV. Their ship codes would make even the strictest HR department raise their eyebrows, and breaking them could lead to consequences far worse than a stern email from your boss. Take their first rule, for example. If you're picturing chaotic brawls breaking out over every little argument, you're in for a surprise. Pirates weren't just a bunch of rowdy sailors throwing punches whenever they felt like it. Believe it or not, they had strict rules about fighting on their ships, and breaking these rules could get you in serious trouble. Back in the 1700s, when some poor sailor got fed up with his crewmates' constant snoring or terrible singing, he couldn't just walk up and sock him in the face. Here's what would actually happen. First, you'd have to march up to the captain, probably still fuming, and ask for permission to beat the living daylights out of your annoying shipmate. The captain would then decide if your beef was worth stopping the ship and heading to land. You know what's funny? Studies of preserved pirate logs show that about 60% of fight requests were denied simply because the captain thought the reasons were too stupid to waste time on. And let me tell you, these fight requests could get ridiculous. One famous account from 1721 describes two pirates requesting permission to duel because one of them claimed the other's parrot was giving him dirty looks. The captain's response: he made them both clean the ship's bathroom together for a week. Problem solved. But when fights were approved, they got creative. Some crews made the fighters hold opposite ends of a sword, last one holding on wins. Others would row to a small island and let the pirates duke it out there. My personal favorite was the tied together method, where they'd rope the fighters' left legs together and give them each a knife. Nothing teaches you to get along like trying to hop around with your enemy attached to your leg. The most practical reason for this rule wasn't just about keeping order, it was about survival. A fight below deck could easily knock over a lantern and set the whole ship ablaze or damage precious navigation equipment. Plus, injured crew members meant less manpower for when they really needed to fight, against actual enemies trying to kill them. But fighting wasn't the worst offense you could commit on a pirate ship. There was one rule that, if broken, would make the entire crew turn against you. Remember that saying about honor among thieves? Pirates took that very seriously. You could loot and plunder every merchant ship from Jamaica to Madagascar, but the moment you swiped your crewmate's golden pocket watch, you were in deep trouble. The punishment for theft was brutal because it destroyed something pirates valued more than gold: trust. These guys needed to sleep sometime, and they couldn't do that if they were worried about their shipmates rifling through their stuff. A fascinating study of pirate court records from the Caribbean shows that out of 829 recorded pirate punishments, 156 were for stealing from crewmates. That's almost 19% of all punishments. And every single one of those thieves either ended up dead or marooned. Speaking of marooning, it wasn't just dropping someone off at a random beach with a coconut and waving goodbye. The whole process was like a twisted game show where the prizes were terrible. First, they'd find a nice deserted island. And by nice, I mean the kind of place where even the mosquitoes had moved out because it was too depressing. Then they'd give you a few party favors, usually a bottle of water, maybe some bread if the captain was feeling generous, and, my personal favorite, a pistol with one shot. That pistol was what pirates called mercy, though I'm pretty sure their definition needs some work. The idea was that if things got too bad, you could use that one bullet to end your suffering. Talk about a retirement package from hell. But some captains skipped the whole marooning drama and went straight for hanging. No water bottle, no bread, no dramatic last moments on a beach, just a quick drop and a sudden stop. You'd think having such harsh punishments would stop theft completely, but there was always some genius who thought they wouldn't get caught. One crew actually had to make a rule about not stealing while pretending to be sleepwalking. Apparently, that was becoming a problem, but even pirates knew life wasn't all about punishment. In fact, they had some surprisingly generous benefits. A few months ago, I had no idea what a health ring even was until my fiancée got me one, and I have to say, I'm shocked this isn't a widely known and used product. It tracks my stress levels, and what I found out is that some supplements made my stress score spike, while others actually helped bring it down. I adjusted a few things based on that, and honestly, I feel 10 years younger. My wife mainly uses it to track her menstrual cycles, and she is obsessed with her sleep quality score. I noticed they are currently running a limited 69% discount, but I don't know how long it will last. It's currently only $60, and it's clear. This one is the best bang for your buck, with other health rings priced around $350 with less functions. They managed to price it this low because they cut out the middleman like Amazon, Walmart, etc., who drive up the price and take a big margin, ending up with the customer paying 3 to 5 times more. If you are on TV, you can check it out yourself by pausing the video and scanning the QR code with your phone camera or clicking the first link in the description of this video. Losing a limb in the 1700s was usually a one-way ticket to becoming a beggar, but pirates, they had better insurance than most modern companies. The compensation system was surprisingly detailed with specific payouts for each type of injury. Lost your right arm? That's 600 pieces of 8. Left arm? Only 500. Sorry, lefties. Even pirates were biased. A leg would get you 400 pieces, and an eye was worth 100. There's even a record of a pirate getting 30 pieces of 8 for losing a pinky toe. A real treasure chest of data comes from the famous Captain Bartholomew Roberts' crew records. His ship actually kept a detailed ledger of injury payments, showing they spent more on compensation in 1 year than some small Caribbean ports made in trading. The most expensive payout? A whopping 1,000 pieces of 8 to a navigator who lost both his right hand and left eye in the same battle. They called him Lucky after that. Pirates had a weird sense of humor. The really fascinating part was how they handled partial injuries. One pirate complained he should get full payment for his arm because it's hanging by a thread anyway. The crew voted and decided to give him half now, half when it finally fell off. Talk about motivational benefits, and you thought your company's dental plan was complicated. But it wasn't just about money. Pirates were practical about injuries. If you lost a leg, they'd find you a new job on the ship that didn't require running around. Lost an eye? Congratulations, you're now the night watchman. Depth perception is overrated anyway. One famous pirate with a wooden leg became the ship's carpenter, claiming he always had an extra piece of wood handy for repairs. The compensation system was actually pretty genius when you think about it. It meant pirates fought harder in battles because they knew they'd be taken care of if things went wrong. Unlike the Royal Navies of the time, where injured sailors were just tossed aside like yesterday's hardtack. And speaking of taking care of injured crew members, pirates didn't just pay you and forget about you. Ever caught the flu at work and had your boss tell you to come in anyway? Pirates would have laughed at that. Sick leave on pirate ships wasn't just allowed, it was mandatory. In fact, a study of pirate ship logs from 1715 to 1725 shows that crews had designated sick quarters, where ill pirates could rest until they recovered. One captain even wrote, "Better to lose a week's work than lose the whole crew to fever." The medical care was, well, interesting. Pirates assigned specific crew members to take care of the sick. These guys weren't exactly trained doctors. Most of them got the job because they could tell medicine from gunpowder, which was apparently a rare skill back then. Their usual treatment plan included rum, some questionable herbs, and prayers that whatever you had wasn't too serious. One popular cure involved hanging patients upside down from the mast because someone convinced the crew it would let the sickness fall out. Surprisingly, some people actually got better after this, probably because they were too terrified to admit they were still sick. Another famous treatment was the garlic necklace, which didn't cure anything but definitely kept everyone at least 6 feet away from you. The ship's log of the Royal Rover shows they kept detailed records of sick days, and nobody lost their share of treasure for being ill. There's even an account of a pirate who got seasick and was allowed to work as a cook's assistant until he got his sea legs. Other crew members had to cover your duties while you recovered. No coming back early and trying to be a hero. Your crewmates would literally throw you back into bed. One captain's log mentions a guy named Stubborn Pete who tried to climb the rigging with a fever. His mates tied him to his hammock for 3 days for his own bloody good. Of course, once you recovered, you had to follow all the other rules of ship life. And some of them were pretty strange. Your personal space on a pirate ship, a hammock measuring exactly 6 feet by 2 feet. That's it. Your entire world squeezed into a piece of fabric smaller than a modern bathroom. And breaking into someone else's hammock space was considered one of the rudest things you could do on a ship, right up there with stealing and not sharing your rum. The hammock rules were ridiculously specific. According to records from the Black Swan in 1719, The punishment for sneaking into another pirate's hammock could range from cleaning the ship's anchor to getting whipped with a wet rope. They took these rules so seriously that one pirate got thrown in the brig for 3 days just for using his crewmate's hammock to dry his socks. The whole hammock system worked like an elaborate game of musical chairs, except nobody was laughing. When you joined a crew, you got assigned your specific hammock spot. The best spots were in the middle of the ship where the rocking was gentler. The worst? Right next to the ship's toilet, or head as they called it. Fun fact, records show that pirates would actually pay each other to trade hammock spots. The going rate for a premium spot away from the head was about 2 weeks' worth of rum rations. Pirates had to sleep in shifts, sharing hammocks with other crew members who worked opposite schedules. They called it hot bunking, because the hammock was still warm from the last person. One captain's log mentions a hilarious argument between 2 pirates who shared a hammock. One complained that his bunkmate slept like an octopus and kept leaving the hammock tangled. The captain's solution? He made them take turns straightening the hammock after each use. Even the way you hang your hammock mattered. Too low and people would trip over you in the dark. Too high and you risked falling out during rough seas. There's a famous story about a pirate who hung his hammock too close to the ceiling and got stuck between the beams during a storm. They had to cut him down with a knife. But while the battle for sleeping space was fierce, another kind of battle raged on deck, one that involved a very different kind of noise. Sorry to break your dreams of becoming a pirate DJ, but ships had strict rules about music. And no, it wasn't because the captain was a grumpy old man who hated fun, though some definitely were. Research from ship logs shows that unauthorized music could actually get you in serious trouble. One unlucky pirate spent a week in the brig just for playing his fiddle after sunset. The official reason? Music could give away their position to enemy ships. But the real reason, according to several captains' journals from the 1720s, was that some pirates were just terrible musicians. One captain wrote, "Had to ban William from playing his flute." The fish started swimming in the opposite direction, and I can't blame them. Another noted, "Either throw Tom's accordion overboard or throw Tom overboard." Crew voted to save Tom, and the accordion now sleeps with the fishes. Most ships had designated musicians, usually guys who could actually tell the difference between a melody and a catfight. These official musicians had special privileges, like extra rum rations and the right to skip certain duties, but they also had responsibilities. They had to play during battles to keep morale up, perform during celebrations, and teach approved songs to the crew. The approved song list was pretty specific too. Records from the Morning Star show they had exactly 27 allowed songs, each with designated times they could be played. You couldn't just belt out a sea shanty whenever you felt like it. Morning songs were for work, afternoon songs for practice, and evening songs had to be gentle enough not to wake the sleeping crew or anger the mermaids. Yes, some pirates actually believed that last part. Some ships had quiet hours that were more strictly enforced than modern library rules. Breaking these could get you some creative punishments, like having to sing lullabies to the ship's rats or being forced to listen to the worst musician on board for an entire watch. But as much as pirates loved their organized chaos, some of them eventually wanted to trade their sea shanties for a quieter life. Unlike your modern job where you have to work until you're 65, pirates actually had a pretty sweet retirement plan. You could call it quits after a certain number of successful raids, major injuries, or just when you'd had enough of the sea life. According to ship records from the 1720s, about 8% of pirates officially retired each year, assuming they lived long enough to enjoy it. The retirement package was no joke either. Take Captain Edward Davis's crew. They had it written in their code that any pirate who served at least 5 years got a hefty retirement bonus. The exact amount? 10 times their regular share of the loot. That's like getting a decade's worth of 401k matching all at once. One particularly lucky pirate named James Murphy walked away with enough gold to buy 3 taverns and a small farm. Talk about diversifying your portfolio, but pirates had different retirement tracks. The most common was settling down in a pirate-friendly port town and opening a business. Usually something useful like a tavern, a supply store, or my personal favorite, a document acquisition service, basically helping other pirates forge papers. There's a record of one retired pirate who opened a dancing school. His marketing pitch? If I can teach a one-legged sailor to dance, I can teach anyone. Some crews even had designated retirement spots. The Golden Hind had a deal with a small Caribbean island where their retired crew members could live for free. The catch? They had to help train new pirates and share their knowledge. It was like a really sketchy community college the smartest pirates planned ahead. Ship logs show that many would secretly stash away small portions of their loot in various ports, creating their own version of offshore banking. One particularly clever fellow buried several small treasures along his favorite trading routes, calling them his retirement fund deposits. Not everyone was cut out for retirement, though. Some pirates found that a quiet life just wasn't their style, which led to an interesting rule. Keep your hands off the crew's money. That was basically rule number one when it came to gambling on pirate ships. Sure, you could bet your own gold, your fancy hat, or even your next meal. But touching the shared treasure fund was completely off limits. Ship records from 1718 show that one unlucky gambler tried to bet the crew's emergency rum supply in a card game. His punishment? He had to count every single grain in a barrel of rice while the crew watched and drank the rum he tried to gamble away. Pirates loved their games of chance, but they had weirdly specific rules about them. The Queen Anne's Revenge had an entire section in their code just about dice games. Apparently, some creative soul had been carving custom dice out of stolen ivory and weighing them with gold dust to cheat. The crew's solution? All dice had to be thrown into the sea before each game and retrieved by the player who wanted to use them. If you weren't willing to dive into shark-infested waters for your lucky dice, you couldn't use them. Card games were even more regulated. Records from various ships show they had designated gambling hours and specific spots on deck where betting was allowed. One captain's log mentions a hilarious incident where two pirates tried to sneak in a midnight poker game during watch duty. They got so caught up in their game that they didn't notice they'd sailed past their target port twice. After that, the punishment for gambling during watch duty was having to wear a sign that said, "I'd bet my own grandmother," for a week. You couldn't bet more than you could lose without crying about it later. Seriously, it's written in multiple ship codes. The Black Swan even had a designated gambling counselor who would assess if someone was betting too much. His qualification for the job? He'd once lost his own wooden leg in a bet and had to hop around for 3 weeks until he won it back. But while pirates were strict about gambling with money, they had an even bigger concern. Secret plots to overthrow the captain? That was a big no-no in the pirate world. Modern office politics have nothing on 18th century ship drama. A fascinating study of pirate trials from 1710 to 1730 shows that 23% of all recorded mutinies failed because someone couldn't keep their mouth shut about the plan. Turns out pirates were terrible at keeping secrets, especially after a few rounds of rum. The thing about pirate captains is that they were actually elected by the crew. It was like a very aggressive form of workplace democracy. Want to replace the captain? Fine, but you had to do it the proper way. Call for a vote or challenge them to a duel. None of this sneaking around in the shadows business. One ship's log describes a captain who caught wind of a secret plot against him. Instead of punishing the plotters, he called an emergency meeting and said, "If you want my job so badly, just say it to my face." Nobody stepped forward. Apparently, complaining about the boss is easier than actually becoming the boss. The punishments for secret mutiny attempts were creative, to say the least. The Morning Star had a particularly ironic one. Failed mutineers had to serve as the captain's personal servants for a month. Imagine having to bring breakfast in bed to the person you just tried to overthrow. Another ship made failed plotters wear a paper crown and carry around a wooden sword for 2 weeks, a reminder that they weren't quite ready for command. But the most effective anti-mutiny measure? Good old-fashioned paperwork. Ships actually had formal complaint procedures. One preserved document shows a hilarious form titled Official Notice of Dissatisfaction with Current Leadership. At the bottom it asked, "Have you considered that maybe you're just hangry?" Followed by, "When was your last proper meal?" Some captains were so paranoid about secret plots that they'd start false rumors about mutiny plans just to catch potential plotters. One captain wrote in his log, "Started a rumor about own assassination. Caught 3 idiots planning to join a fake plot. Made them apologize to the entire crew through interpretive dance." But when night fell, plotting wasn't the only thing captains worried about. That's why another different rule came into play. Lights out at 8 p.m. Sounds like something your parents would say, but pirates actually had a strict bedtime policy. Well, sort of. Ship records from the 1720s show that around 82% of pirate vessels enforced some kind of lights out rule, mainly because a ship lit up at night might as well have been wearing a sign saying, "Free treasure here, come and get it." The rules were pretty specific about which lights could stay on and where. According to the logbook of the Flying Fortune, only 3 types of lights were allowed after dark: the navigation lantern, the captain's cabin light, because apparently being captain meant you got to stay up late, and any light in designated drinking areas. That's right, if you were partying, you could keep the candles burning. One captain got so fed up with people breaking the lights out rule that he created a position called the Dark Enforcer. This poor soul had to walk around the ship at night, making sure all unauthorized lights were out. The job came with some perks though. You got extra rum rations because everyone hated you for making them go to bed. There's an account of one Dark Enforcer who got caught using his own lantern to read romance novels during his rounds. His punishment? He had to dramatically read his books out loud to the crew during dinner for a week. The drinking exception led to some creative interpretations of the rules. Crews would claim they were having a mandatory crew meeting that happened to involve rum, just to keep their lights on. One ship's log mentions a group of pirates who carried around empty mugs all night, insisting they were about to start drinking any minute now to avoid the lights out rule. For all their reputation as lawless rebels, these rules show that pirates weren't just wild criminals. They were actually running some pretty organized floating communities,